The music was beautiful, the flowers were perfect, and hundreds of people were smiling beneath the bright afternoon sky, but at the far end of the wedding garden, a single father sat completely alone, staring at a half-finished glass of water as if it contained the answer to every problem in his life. Nobody knew that the man in the simple charcoal suit had spent the morning repairing his son's old school shoes, skipping breakfast so he could afford the next week's groceries, and quietly wondering how long he could keep pretending that everything was going to be okay. Then, just as the newlyweds prepared to cut their wedding cake, an older billionaire woman left her table, walked directly across the lawn, and stopped beside him. What she said next would change not only his life, but the future of his little boy. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness can give people a second chance when life has almost broken them, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Hardworking Dad. You never know whose heart might need a little kindness today. His name was Marcus Hale, a 38-year-old father who had learned to measure life in small victories. His greatest victory was his 9-year-old son, Rowan. 3 years earlier, Marcus had lost his wife after a sudden illness, and since then, every responsibility had landed on his shoulders. He worked during the day as a maintenance supervisor at a modest apartment complex and took small repair jobs in the evenings whenever someone needed plumbing fixed, furniture assembled, or an old appliance brought back to life. His hands were rough, his clothes were always carefully washed but rarely new, and the exhaustion beneath his eyes had become something he barely noticed anymore. Yet every morning, when Rowan appeared at the kitchen table with messy brown hair and a sleepy smile, Marcus found enough strength to begin another day. The wedding invitation had come from Marcus's former co-worker, Adrian Mercer, who had insisted that Marcus attend. Adrian was marrying a woman from an influential family, and the celebration was being held at a breathtaking estate outside the city. Marcus almost declined because he could not afford a gift that matched the occasion, but Rowan had encouraged him to go, telling his father that sometimes people needed to celebrate even when life was difficult. So Marcus had borrowed a suit from a friend, polished his old shoes until they shone, and arrived alone because Rowan was spending the afternoon with a trusted neighbor. He had hoped to stay for a short while, offer his congratulations, and leave before anyone noticed how uncomfortable he felt among people who arrived in luxury cars and spoke casually about vacations Marcus could not imagine taking. At first, everything went according to plan. He congratulated Adrian, placed his modest gift on the table, and found a quiet seat beneath a large white canopy overlooking the garden. Around him, guests laughed, photographed one another, and discussed business deals. Marcus smiled when someone greeted him, but no conversation lasted more than a few seconds. Eventually, he realized that most people simply did not know what to do with a tired single father whose world revolved around school lunches, utility bills, and making sure his son never felt the emptiness left behind by his mother. Then he noticed the woman. Her name was Celestine Voss, a 71-year-old billionaire whose name appeared regularly in financial magazines. She had built a vast technology and property empire after taking over a struggling family company decades earlier, but people at the wedding knew her mostly as the mysterious aunt of the bride. Celestine was dressed elegantly in a deep blue afternoon suit, with silver hair neatly swept back and a calm expression that made people instinctively straighten when she walked past. She had spent most of the reception surrounded by executives and relatives, yet suddenly she stopped speaking, looked across the garden, and noticed Marcus sitting alone. For several seconds, she simply watched him. Marcus did not notice her approach until her shadow fell across his table. Celestine sat in the empty chair opposite him without asking anyone to introduce them. Instead of discussing his clothes, his job, or why he was alone, she looked at the untouched plate in front of him and asked whether he was enjoying the food. Marcus gave a polite smile and said it was wonderful. She looked at his plate again and quietly observed that a wonderful meal was difficult to enjoy when someone was too worried to eat. That sentence struck him harder than he expected. Marcus lowered his eyes. He did not want sympathy. He had spent years avoiding it. He had learned that once people saw weakness, they sometimes treated you differently. So he simply explained that he had a lot on his mind. Celestine nodded as though she understood more than he had said. Their conversation continued, and slowly Marcus discovered something unexpected. Celestine did not care about his job title. She asked about his son. When Marcus mentioned Rowan, his entire face changed. The tiredness remained, but pride appeared beneath it. He described how Rowan loved astronomy, how he built cardboard models of planets, and how he had recently started asking why some families had so much while others struggled. Celestine listened carefully. Then she asked Marcus what he wanted for his son. He hesitated before answering. He said he wanted Rowan to grow up believing that his circumstances did not define him. Celestine became silent. For the first time that afternoon, the billionaire woman looked less like a powerful businesswoman and more like an elderly mother remembering something painful. She told Marcus that decades earlier, when she was young, she had watched her own father lose everything. Their family had once been wealthy, but a failed business had left them with almost nothing. She remembered her father taking whatever work he could find while pretending everything was fine. What she remembered most was not the poverty. It was the shame on his face whenever someone offered help. Celestine said she had spent her entire life building wealth because she never wanted another child in her family to experience that helplessness. Marcus listened quietly. Then she asked him why he was really sitting alone. He finally admitted the truth. His apartment lease was ending in 2 months. The landlord had raised the rent. His workplace had recently reduced overtime hours. Rowan needed new school supplies, and there was a medical bill from the previous winter that Marcus was still paying in small installments. He had not told anyone because he was afraid that asking for help would make him feel like a failure. Celestine looked at him for a long moment. Then she said something Marcus would remember for the rest of his life: being responsible for a child did not mean carrying every burden alone. Marcus almost laughed because it sounded so simple, yet those words touched the exact wound he had hidden for years. What he did not know was that Celestine had been watching the wedding guests all afternoon. She had noticed how many people spoke about generosity but rarely practiced it. She had also noticed Marcus earlier helping an elderly waiter pick up a tray after the man stumbled near the kitchen entrance. Marcus had not realized anyone had seen him. He had simply helped because he believed people should help each other. Celestine had seen enough. The next morning, Marcus received an unexpected phone call from the director of a community development company owned by Celestine. They had reviewed his employment history and wanted to offer him a position managing residential maintenance for several properties. The salary was significantly higher than his current income, but the offer came with another surprise: professional training and flexible hours so he could remain available for Rowan. Marcus initially refused. He assumed it was charity. Celestine personally called him later that evening. She explained that she was not offering him a gift. She was offering him an opportunity because she had seen something valuable in him: reliability, humility, and the courage to keep showing up for his son when life gave him every reason to stop. Marcus accepted. The months that followed were not magically perfect. There were still difficult mornings. Rowan still missed his mother. Marcus still worried about money from time to time. But something had changed. The constant fear that had lived inside him began to fade. His new position allowed him to move into a safer apartment closer to Rowan's school. He began saving money. Rowan joined a science club and eventually won a small school competition for a model of the solar system. Marcus sat in the audience that day, clapping harder than anyone else. Celestine was there too. She had quietly become part of their lives, not as a billionaire benefactor, but as someone who cared about Rowan's dreams and respected Marcus's determination. She helped fund the school's science program, but she made sure the donation remained anonymous. Marcus understood why. She did not want praise. She wanted impact. One afternoon, nearly a year after the wedding, Marcus returned to the same estate where they had first met. This time, he was not wearing a borrowed suit. He was attending a charity event organized by Celestine to support working parents who were struggling to balance employment and family responsibilities. Before the event began, Marcus stood alone in the same garden. He remembered the man who had sat there almost a year earlier, afraid that his life was falling apart. Then Rowan ran across the lawn and hugged him. Marcus closed his eyes and held his son tightly. Celestine watched them from a short distance away, smiling. Marcus realized that the greatest change in his life had not been the new salary or the better apartment. It was the return of hope. Someone had looked past his tired clothes, his financial problems, and his loneliness and had seen the person he still had the potential to become. As the afternoon celebration continued, Marcus finally understood something he wished he had learned years earlier. Sometimes a second chance does not arrive looking like a miracle. Sometimes it arrives as a stranger sitting beside you when everyone else has chosen another table. Sometimes kindness is simply noticing that someone is struggling and deciding not to walk away. And sometimes the person who changes your life is not the person who gives you money, but the person who reminds you that you were never worthless simply because life became difficult. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who may need encouragement, and subscribe to Hard-Working Dad. Your support helps these stories reach people who need a little hope. And before you leave, I have one special request: comment "second chances" below if you believe that one act of kindness can change the direction of an entire life. Because Marcus sat alone at that wedding believing nobody noticed him. But someone did. And sometimes, that is all a broken heart needs to begin believing in tomorrow again.